In this video, I want to riff on the difference between advertising and publicity. I recently heard somebody say that advertising doesn't build brands, publicity does, and that's not really accurate. Advertising and publicity both serve the same function, which is to generate attention and awareness to your brand and your business, which ideally translates into customers. In fact, publicity is really just a form of advertising that others do on your behalf. And you can absolutely make the argument that it's almost always more believable when someone else sings your high praises than when you sing your high praises, especially if it's from a trusted source. And so what you could say about publicity is that the value of the impressions that it generates is higher because it's more effective by virtue of the fact that it's more believable and more trustworthy. Totally fair. But if your approach is either or and you opt for publicity, there are three pretty big trade-offs that you're making. Trade-off one is control over your message and your narrative. So when somebody else creates a piece of media about you, you can influence that message, but you can't control it. Trade-off two is control over how many people see that piece of content. And a really obvious example of this is, let's say a new blogger comes to your restaurant and they say that they want to make a piece of content about you, but only 10 people a month go to their website. Well, that's still publicity, but no one's really going to see that content anytime soon. And you absolutely should still make that content because that can grow, so that's great. Whereas when you, especially with online methods like Facebook or Google, there's a metric called cost per 1,000 impressions, and after a few thousand impressions, you begin to understand exactly how much it costs to put a message out in front of 1,000 people, which leads me to the last trade-off, which is data. And again, this is particularly for online methods, but when you engage in any kind of public relations or you get a piece of content, you get publicity, you don't see the data most of the time. I mean, some outlets might share it with you if you ask for it, but most of the time they're not going to volunteer the data behind your piece of content. Whereas when you do advertise, especially online, you can get absolutely surgical in terms of the data you can see. You can even come up with your own metrics, whether it's earnings per impression. So you can see whenever you've made an impression, how much you get in earnings if you're tracking your sales. So when you're considering advertising and publicity and how they fit into your attention and awareness machine, it really isn't either or, it's both.